before I forget, Lucy, you got to see me after class. No, seriously, you're not in trouble, but actually you are in trouble. I just didn't want to. So let's kind of walk through the five laws. Okay, I know that we went through them, but let's go a little bit deeper into what they say. Law of sowing and reaping. Now, for those of you that have gone to church, that come to church, have been there in the past, whatever the case may be, we know that sowing and reaping has to deal with, whatever you put in, that's what you're going to get out. Would you say that's a pretty fair statement when it comes to your relationship? Yeah. What you put out, let me rephrase that. What you put in, okay, will be pretty consequential to what you're able to get out. Somebody who is selfish, somebody who is not willing to give of themselves, how can you expect the other person to be receptive to doing anything for you when you're not really willing to do anything for them? So sowing and reaping, it's a good thing to keep in the back of your mind so that you can go, hey, listen, I know it's not really a manipulation thing, but really you should want to sow into your relationship. You should want to be able to do things for the other person. And if you look at right under law number 1, it says, when in your marriage have you not reaped the consequences you have sown, or in what ways are you avoiding them now? Think about it. Is there a time in your relationship where you haven't reaped the consequences that you've sown? If you walk around with an attitude, or you're short on patience, or you just got bad juju going through you, or whatever the case may be, and you cannot control yourself, do you think that you've had consequences to your attitude?
Yes.
Right? I mean, listen, if ladies, if you treat your man bad, he's not going to respond great, and vice versa. If the man treats the woman not great, then how do you expect them to just be overwhelmingly in love? I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. The motivation lacks tremendously when you're not willing to do for the other person. So I don't think that there's many situations where we don't reap consequences. It's kind of like going back to the very basics. For every decision, there is a reaction, right? For every question that comes up in life, every time that you have to make a decision as to a direction in your life, there is, for every action, there's a reaction. So reaping and sowing, action, reaction, all goes in the same hand in hand. Whatever you do, there's going to be something that goes right along with that.
My mic is not. Oh, it is working. It's a new mic. I think that this can frustrate a lot of people who are sowing good things into their marriage, but you have one spouse that's unwilling and that is just determined to sabotage the relationship and undermine it. This makes it very difficult because marriage is hard work, even when you both are working towards the same goal. So if you have an individual that is determined, or like he said, the one person that is married but wants to live like they're a single person, well, that's going to devastate the relationship. And you may have one person who is sowing good things, who wants to do the right thing, and I think that's why Scripture reminds us to not grow weary. Don't get tired of doing good things, because in due season, you will reap the reward. And sometimes we don't see it right away, and we give up. So that's a reminder for those who are doing the right thing, and they're not seeing the results right at this moment. And it's also an open scolding or rebuke to those who purposely undermine the relationship and who really don't care what happens to their marriage, not caring about the children, the future, or whatever the case may be.
There's a lot of times when people will come and they'll, especially when someone gets confronted with the fact of, oh, you should go to Fusion, check it out, you should go, well, and then you talk about it with your significant other and they're like, yeah, no, I'm not going. Typically that's the man that says that because man doesn't think that he needs a marriage class or a workshop or anything because, you know, I'm a man. I don't need that. I can handle everything. But the reality of it is that we have encouraged many people a lot of times. Listen, if your spouse doesn't want to come, you come. Well, but they're the one that needs to hear it, you know? But the thing is that if you go and you come back, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but the thing is that it doesn't matter because I know that there's been a number of people that have come by themselves at first, and then all of a sudden, you know, the spouse sees things that are happening or hears things that are happening or you know, you go back and it's like you have this renewed energy towards your relationship or tools in your toolbox and the other person can't help but want to come. And so eventually we've seen the other spouse wind up coming, and I always tell a woman that says, oh, I can't get my husband to come, I always will throw out there, listen, tell him to come one time. Tell him to come one time. If he doesn't like it, he never has to come. Tell him he never has to come again if he doesn't like it. And I really believe that between myself and God, and you know, we'll get him to come back. Because all they have to do is find out that it's not a threatening environment. We're not all ganging up on men to show you how bad you messed up, and it's usually all your fault. Which it is. But so, anyway, with that said, that second thing in there, it says, it's asking, when in your marriage has your spouse not reaped the consequences they've sown, or in what ways are you letting your spouse do so now? You know, one thing that I know from experience in the past, something that we've grown through and overcome, is I think it's pretty typical human nature that if someone gets under your skin, your initial reaction is, well, I'm going to get you back. Right? I mean, if someone ticks you off, the first thing that you really want to do is, I have no reason to talk to you. Right? That's where talk to the hand came from. A woman created that. I'm very confident in that fact. Okay? I believe the Lord revealed that to me. But the thing is we're very reactionary. We all want to get to the point where it's like we're vindictive. We want to get back. It doesn't matter, and the funny part is that the closer somebody is to you, the more desire that you feel as though, oh, I need to get them back. If your sister or your brother or your mom or your dad, you want to get them back more so than the stranger. Why that is, I don't know, but it holds true. And I know that when Claudine and I first got married, and, you know, obviously, you know, you go through the honeymoon stage, and then reality smacks you in the face and knocks you on the ground and kicks the wind out of you. Other than that, it's good. But those things happen, and then of course, you know, problems start to arise. And anybody who goes into a marriage thinking that, oh, you know, we dated for 2 years, we never had a fight. Oh man, the first one you're gonna have is gonna knock you out because we fight, you know, and that's the reality of it. But we overcame that point where, yeah, there were times it's like, I don't want to, you know, it's like, I don't want to talk because you made me mad. Or I don't want to put the effort in because you made me mad. And we got over that because bottom line is, you're going to go to bed, you're going to wake up, you're not going anywhere, really, if you're committed to the relationship. So you better do what you can to make it work, right? So there's a lot of give and take when it comes to a relationship, and we got to that point where it's like, okay, so let's figure this thing out. And that's the hope that all of you should have too, is instead of figuring out a way to get even, figure out a way to, as much effort as it takes to figure out a way to get even, you can put that effort into figuring out a way to overcome it.
That's good. That's very good.
Did you want to say something? I'm glad I meet your approval.
I just wanted to say, when you have two people that really never saw structure growing up, that never really saw what a loving, nurturing relationship looked like, they come into their marriage and not really knowing. They're two good people who mean well, and they're committed, and that's where we were. Not to say that we had bad parents, it's just not what we wanted our marriage to look like. And this is why, you know, educating yourself and learning or figuring out how to make this work is important, because you know that, you don't know, we didn't know what we wanted, but we know that we didn't want it to look like what we were looking at. So with that said, the fact that we were both committed, and we knew that, there's a peace of mind. Now, I really want to invest in this because I know that you are 100% committed. And then that makes the other person really want to invest in this because they're both committed 100%. Whenever one person doesn't feel secure, then that's when they're not willing to put forth all the effort.
There's you know, a lot of people out there that are in different parts of society and have been raised with different backgrounds. And I was watching something yesterday, and the comment was that people don't know. People legitimately don't know how to have a good relationship. People don't know how to have that commitment to kids. I mean, if you look, and maybe not right here in Lake Elsinore, but look, United States-wise, there's a tremendous amount of single moms out there. There's a tremendous amount of broken families out there. It's not that they're bad people, well, some of them, but the majority of them just don't know. And so you can't really blame them. And if they had something like this available to them, I'm not saying fusion is the end-all answer. It is. But what I am saying is people don't know. It's and even the basics of just being able to commit yourself to somebody, to be able to bend, to be able to negotiate, to be able to just work with somebody else when it comes to life matters is very, very difficult for some people.
And that's exactly what I was saying. Some of us just don't know. And so you have good people who really want to be married, who really want to make this work, but you have maybe the young man who doesn't know what being committed looks like, or the young woman who doesn't know what being committed looks like. This is why it's so important that we surround ourselves with people who appear to have it together because we can learn from them. And this is why the church is so important. And, you know, men's ministry is so important. And women's ministry is so important. Because there's somebody in there, as a woman, as a young woman, or as an older woman, or men and younger men, that you can learn from. These are men that are married, that have lives, who have probably made the mistakes that you don't have to make. And by being around them and learning from them, there's a lot to be gained.
Well, how many of you have ever heard that saying that says you're only as good as the people that you're surrounded by? You know, it's like, well, I thought that pertained to business. No, that pertains to life. You know, I heard someone say, I don't remember who it was, but you know, for the younger people that aren't married and you know, some of us have kids that are teenagers or whatever, it's like, you want to see what your future is going to be like? Look at the friends you're hanging around. You know, I look back to my childhood and my teens and everything, it's like, oh man, things are really bad, you know. Did you have a comment, Frank?
From, you know, when I was dating, one thing I noticed a lot of women said their husbands were abusive, not physically,
Right.
but emotionally, you know, and verbally. That us guys need to be careful just because we're guys. We need to treat our wives with love and like they're somebody special.
That's true.
Not just something.
That's true. And, you know, just to touch on that real briefly, we've talked about it. We know that abuse goes way beyond, well, he doesn't hit me. Or if your man tells you, well, I won't hit you. But, you know, psychological or mental or verbal abuse is just as bad, and people bruise in a different way as the actual physical abuse. And that goes both ways. because I know plenty of women can be extremely verbally abusive, or emotionally abusive, or psychologically abusive. Not me, not me. But it can happen, so you gotta be careful. Okay, let's talk about law number 2. Law number 2 is the law of responsibility. Oh, you mean I gotta get married and be responsible too? I can't just keep on, no. So if you look at it, in what area of marriage, if any, are you neglecting your responsibility? I don't want, listen, my idea is not to have to raise your hand and go, well, you know, I'm neglecting my area of responsibility in this area. What I want you to do is I want you to reflect inside your head and think about it. Think about the responsibilities that go along with a relationship, that go along with a marriage, that go along with having kids or grandkids or whatever the case may be, wherever you are in your life, or the future thought of. And think about what area are you neglecting, or have you not had that responsibility? Are you, for example, failing to love your spouse? Well, you know, it's very easy for us to get defensive and say, well, I love them, I'm still here, right? I mean, I still come home every night, but there's a difference between what you think of yourself as saying, I love my spouse, and what the reality of is, again, two different people. You know, if you ask me what's the definition of love, and ask Claudina what the definition of love is, you may very well get two different answers. So her expectation of what love means may be completely different than, and so this is why communication is paramount in being able to do that. We talked about boundaries last week, about having that freedom to be able to communicate to your spouse how you really feel. Because if you can't communicate how you really feel in a way that's not hurtful, or not demeaning, or not spiteful, then how do you expect the relationship to progress if you're not even being honest with your spouse? Are you hearing me? Mm-hmm. All right. So, there's a golden rule for not treating your mate as yourself, the way that you would want to be treated. That's a great way to think about it. What is your best case scenario when it comes to the way that you want to be treated in a relationship? Well, I want to be respected, I want to be loved, I want to be, you know, talked to in a nice way, I want nice things done for me. Well, so does your spouse. And so if you don't have that within you, if you're not putting those things into perspective, then there's an area of responsibility that's being neglected. Of course, we don't like to admit our faults. We don't like to say, well, you know, I'm dropping the ball. I'm the first one to tell my wife at least 2 times a year. No, but really, 2 times a year, that's every 6 months, and if you can be in your relationship and realize, I'm dropping the ball in certain areas, you know? You have to be a big enough person to realize that you're dropping the ball. You got to be a big enough person to realize that you need to step it up in certain areas of your life. Those areas may not be the same all the time, but just understanding that we're constantly progressing is something that's really important to be able to stay within your responsibility boundaries. And then it asks, how, if at all, are you taking responsibility for your spouse's feelings, attitudes, values, or everyday difficulty? Or, in what ways are you allowing your spouse to take responsibility for your feelings, attitudes, values, or everyday difficulties? Sometimes, we will love to take something that we're going through and blame our spouse. It's your fault that I feel this way. It's your fault that I'm not being able to progress in this. It's your fault. It's very easy to take your finger and go like this, right? When in reality it's right here. We need to take responsibility for ourselves. I've said very, very many times in the past, you cannot blame somebody else for the way that you feel. The only way that that happens is when you give them that power to make you feel the way that you feel. Are you with me? Your spouse probably has more power. You should have the freedom to not allow you to feel in a negative way. So, that being said, there's a lot of responsibility that goes in the relationship, both for yourself and for your spouse. Any comments? No? Okay. Law number 3, the law of power. If you ask yourself, what about your spouse would you like to change? I know some of your wheels are going right now and you're going, oh God, you ain't got time to hear all the things that I would like to change about my spouse. But trust me when I tell you, their wheels are spinning just as fast, thinking about all the ways that they'd like to change you. Okay? Bottom line is you got what you got. So make the best of it and work with it. Right? It asks, what about yourself, your attitude, your response in regards to what you just identified about your spouse? Can you change? Or better yet, ask God to change. It says, what about yourself? What about your spouse? Man, there's so many things that I would love to change. But Claudina's not going to change them for me. Only I can change the things about me that I want to change, and God can change those things. So if I want something to change, it's going to be between me and God.
That's right.
If you want your spouse to change, then that's going to be between them and God. You can pray for those things to happen, but if that's not God's will, maybe there's something that your spouse does that you want to change, but in reality, God's trying to use that for you to change. Boom. Right? And that's a hard thing to deal with. That holds true for other people outside of your relationship. That could be people in church. Because listen, I know you're holding your mic and you're already talking, you know what's on. But the thing is that, you know, there may be people in church that just, man, rub you the wrong way. Right? I know. That's not even Christian life. But the reality of it is some people get on your very last nerve. And the fact that they love Jesus doesn't mean nothing. Okay? Jesus loves you, but you're annoying. Okay? But maybe God brought that person into your life for a reason. I know, to annoy me. No. To try to get you to change something about you, or be more understanding, or be more loving, or be more compassionate. Right? Yeah, some of you are like, no, I don't believe that from God. No, I got to go this way. Okay, she said let you go.
Okay, before I became a Christian, Sylvia had a big friend that when she walked in the house, I walked out. I wouldn't even say hi to her. And after I became a Christian, the Lord helped me develop a love for this person. That, like I say, before I became a Christian, I would not acknowledge she was alive, basically. So, you know, the Lord can change our hearts to accept things that we think we can accept, or, you know.
Well, you know, let's go biblical for a second. Is there anything too difficult for God? No. So, I mean, if you got something that you need changed in your life and you look to God for help, there's nothing too difficult. You know, there really isn't. You may absolutely despise something, and God can change your heart, change your mind, change your emotion, change your thought in the blink of an eye. Mrs. Thad.
I think that how that has helped me, and what God has shown me through that, loving people where they're at. What does that mean? Does it mean that I subject myself to emotional, psychological, or verbal abuse? No. It means standing in a place of love where you wish someone well, you love them from that perspective, and you don't pray any evil. You just love that person because they are a child of God. And have to remember that everybody is somewhere in their walk with the Lord. We've talked about this before. There's a journey. There's a journey walk. And this goes for marriage as well. Jesus died for your spouse and for you. He's the author and the finisher of your walk in your life. But he's also the in-between producer. And there's a lot that happens in between. We talk about author and finisher, but we don't like to look at what could be the in-between. Marriage is the same way. You get married, it's the beginning, then there's the journey walk. And there's a lot of things that happen. So if God loves us, he's the author, the finisher, and the producer of the journey. He helps us along the way when we fall. He picks us up when we sin. He forgives us of our sins. He helps us. He teaches us, etc., etc., etc. We're no different. We are to look at our spouse the same way and believe that God will finish what he has started in their life. If you're praying for someone that is not saved yet or doesn't go to church, or someone that you feel is not as spiritual as you, that's the key. Seeing someone from the perspective of from where God sees them. And if God's not frustrated, you don't have a right to be frustrated either.
I gotta write that down. My last nerve. All right, so if you think about or ask yourself, what about yourself would you like to change? About yourself. Keep that in mind the next time that you're confronted with a behavior in your spouse that you would like to change. You know? Because I know, let's just be real, you don't have to raise your hand or admit it, but there are things that your spouse does that just bothers you. Right? I know, don't look at them when you're saying, okay? But there are things that they do. But man and woman, trust me when I tell you, I don't discuss it. I didn't say discuss it. Trust me when I tell you, there are things that you do that irritate your spouse. You know? One of the things, well, I won't even say it before you're Juanita can't stand me eating chips. She can't stand it. No, yeah, you're in a different room.
No, but there's a noises bother you.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, she's told me breathing bothers her, but that's, you know. So you gotta think about the next time that your spouse does something that's annoying to you, and you wish, oh God, I wish they would change that. Trust me when I tell you, think about the things that you need to change that irritate your spouse. See, y'all got quiet now. It's like, oh man. Listen, the reality of it is you don't have the power to change your spouse. I know that a lot of us got married and we thought, you know, there were little telltale signs before we got married. Oh, you know, that's not that big a deal. I'm sure I could get them to change once we're married. Right? That went right out. You ain't changing nothing, okay? Only God and themselves can change that. So I know that a lot of us went into relationships being disappointed when the reality came and we found out, oh, I can't change that. Or I really tried to change that and they're not willing to change. You don't have the power to change your spouse. But you have the power to confess or to submit or to repent of your own hurtful ways, to ask God's help, to be willing to change, to identify ways that you're contributing to the marriage problem. And over time, the hope is that you grow through the unhelpful ways that you're dealing with those issues. So think about which one of those powers that you can begin to start exercising. We all, you know, don't consider that. We all have superpowers. Hopefully it's not superpowers in the negative. Okay? Law number 4 is the law of respect. Think about, when did you say no last to your spouse? I know some of the ladies are thinking just last night. But if you think about when you last said no to your spouse, think about how they reacted to your no. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the least respected, how respected did you feel? It doesn't have to be anything along the lines of what my innuendo took your mind to. It could be something as simple as talking about one of the kids, or talking about where to go, or what to do, or anything like that. The way, you know, statistically they say that when you communicate with somebody, 80% of it or more is body language, and 20% is tone, may even be less. So the way you throw yourself into saying no, you know, the way that you say something can have a devastating effect on how that other person feels respected or lack of being respected. You with me? Number 5 is the law of motivation. The law of motivation says having to do anything is a sign that someone is afraid. Having to do something. Fear of losing love, losing a spouse, maybe fear of their anger, fear of being alone, fear of being a bad person, having to deal with guilty feelings or losing someone's approval, are some of the fears that can motivate us to say yes when really we want to say no. And there are reasons listed above there that maybe has interfered with your efforts to set or maintain boundaries in the marriage. I'll give you an example. Let's say that someone gets married. Well, 2 people get married. And let's say that, you know, at the beginning of the relationship, things were good. You know, both of you were working, bills were being paid, things like that. Guy loses his job, been on unemployment for a while, unemployment's going to run out, doesn't know what to do, doesn't know where to go, doesn't know what to do. And this is a hypothetical scenario. Why it came to my mind, I don't know. I'm twisted. Oh, that's all I can say. So the guy resorts to dealing drugs. Not just weed, but he's dealing anything that he can basically make a buck on. Okay? The hard stuff, the bad stuff, doesn't matter how that. Now, at first, he doesn't tell his wife because he just wants to be the breadwinner and be supportive and be responsible and everything. But ultimately, now cash is starting to flow in. She's like, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing? And he finally commits telling her. And she goes absolutely bonkers because the woman, who has a tendency to have more wisdom than men in most cases, sorry guys, okay, will sit there and play the scenarios through their head of when you get caught, not if you get caught, when you get caught, what about this, what about me, what about the kids, what about the bills, what about this, and I'm already thinking in my head, I ain't waiting for you, right? So she tells you, no, you have to stop doing this, there's no way that I can do that, but you insist. Now, the law of motivation talks about this because your fear of losing someone's approval or having to deal with guilty feelings, or maybe even fearing of losing him or his love or dealing with his anger, will keep you from fighting that fight when you know in the back of your head it's wrong. Now, I know that's a wild scenario, but maybe I painted a picture to where it makes you think of something else. And so, that motivation cannot interfere because of those things. If you have 2 people that love each other and committed to each other, there cannot be those fears of. See, I really don't, and Claudina says I'm a little too confident sometimes, but I don't have a fear of her leaving me. Why? Besides being awesome? You know? I'm not sure if I like that laugh. My confidence in her not leaving me is because I know that she's committed to the relationship. I'm very confident in that fact. and hopefully she shares that confidence with me being in that same situation. So I don't. Was I wrong?
I just wanted to tell people, we didn't get there overnight. We had to build on this. It came through lots of communication. It came through lots of, we didn't get there overnight because I was very insecure when we got met. I honestly came into the marriage thinking it'll last however long it lasts. That's horrible, but that's how I came into this. I really wasn't, I had no expectations. And through time, and with God in our marriage, the freedom that I found to know that, the peace that comes from knowing that you are committed. You're in this. And it helps when you talk and you have conversations and your spouse tells you, I am here through thick and thin. I'm not going anywhere. And it's so sad to say that because some of us didn't come from such a structured or peaceful place that you take that on into your adulthood, not knowing that God wants you to have the freedom and the peace to know that you bring him into something, he's going to be there to take care of this till the end. And this is what we want you to have. We want you to have a marriage where you both know that you are committed to each other and you have each other's back. And we want you to have a marriage so that you can win. This is why we teach this material. We want you to have a win marriage. A perfect marriage, maybe not. I don't believe there's such. Maybe there are, maybe just a few. We're not one of those. We still have to practice. We still have to, read our word and put into die to the flesh and walk in love and be rooted in love, and that's okay.
You sound a little angry when you say that.
Angry?
We have to die to the flesh and be rooted in love.
Many times that I have gotten up in the morning and said, I have no control over this. I am so grateful, Lord, for where we are, and we're not where we're going to be, but I know we're not where we used to be.
Yeah.
And that is progress. And if I see progress, that encourages me to continue to suffer.
Yeah. No, I agree. All right, we got to get into the second part of the video, and then we'll come back and talk for as much time as we have left. He talks to his spouse, honey, when I come to you and I try to express myself, remind me of Joel Osteen for a minute, but he's talking about, and when you do that, it makes me want to, that as well as I do, that in the heat of the moment when things are going on, you have a hard time expressing yourself that way.
Yep.
But if we can get to the point where we can express ourselves that way, where we can just be calm and yet express ourselves in a heartfelt way, things really will get better. I don't have a lot of time, so we're gonna go through this. But the law of evaluation, bottom line, it's unloving to set limits on your spouse, to harm them or her. And it can be just as unloving to avoid setting a limit with your spouse because you don't want them to be comfortable. So if you think about it, self-reflection, are you currently being unloving in either of those ways? And what can you do to rectify the situation if you are being unloving? It is easy if there usually is one dominant person in the relationship, and if that person is going around setting limits on the other person, I want Claudina to be the best person that she can be. I can't set any limits on her. But setting limits and having boundaries, two different things. Right? And of course, Claudina and I both still deal with expectations. I have an expectation that boundaries are going to be set, things are going to be, and she has the same thing. And believe me when I tell you, there are still times when we let each other down.
I think that comes through communication. We talk, we love to talk. I'm so grateful that we do spend a lot of time communicating about our dreams, our fears, the vision. And we know that ultimately God is in control. and we're okay with that. But I guess with that said, I know that the expectation is on both of our ends that no matter what, we're going to protect our marriage. And that is a good expectation to have. We are going to protect our marriage. Anything that comes our way and there are seasons where, you have to work hard on something and maybe, your spouse has to understand. But at our age, we realize that our future we kind of know what the vision for our marriage is, so we know that anything that comes that deviates from that togetherness, that oneness, that wholeness, that harmony that we have created, we know that it's not something that I can cross, even if I want it for myself.
That's right. So, law number 7 is law of proactivity. And if you think about what can you do to encourage your spouse to be proactive, think about it. Are you the kind of person that waits to the point of blowing up before you're telling your spouse about something that's bothering you? You just keep bottling it in and bottling it in and bottling it in until you feel like you're going to explode, and it's like, ah! And then you just let it go. Well, that's not good for you, health-wise, and it's certainly not good for your relationship. Okay, so those are things that you need to consider on being able to work on. And think about, is your spouse that way? And why do you think that you chose that path? Why is it that you are that person that waits till the very end? Is it because your spouse does not allow you to communicate? That they don't allow you to be able to express how you feel when something's bothering you? That needs to be a door of communication of, listen, I really feel the need that when something's bothering me, I need to be able to come to you and talk to you in a rational way, and you not shooting me down. If I can't vent on you, kind of like what he said, honey, I just want to come to you and be able to communicate with you and have the dog on the floor listening, and just love each other, but you got to be able to communicate with each other. Communication is paramount to all of these things. Listen, if you go into a relationship and really there's no communication except for that top level communication of, hey, how are you, what's for dinner, where are we going, what are we doing? If you can't have deeper communication, you better think twice about having that relationship. Because if you can't communicate at the very beginning, oh, that's something that we'll just learn to do when we get married. Yeah, okay, you want to set your appointment now for counseling? You just got to be smart about it. Law number 8, the law of envy. Think about this on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being bright white and 10 being dark forest green. How envious are you? How envious are you of your spouse or somebody else? How envious is your spouse? That's the law of envy. There's nothing to be envious about your spouse with. Law number 9, the law of activity. Think about your marriage and whether one of you is the active spouse and the other one the passive one. Or if you consider yourself the active spouse in your marriage, think about brief examples of your ability or tendency to take initiative. Are you the one that takes initiative? And we're not talking about... That's not what we're talking about, okay? Initiative is in a lot of other areas. If you think about what area in your marriage could you and will you take the initiative rather than merely wait for your spouse to act? Someone's got to take the initiative when it comes to paying the bills. Someone's got to take the initiative when it comes to making financial decisions. Someone's got to take the initiative on initiating communication. Because if the both of you sit in the corner and go, well, I'm not going to say anything, well, I'm not going to say anything, then both of you are not saying anything. And that doesn't help the situation at all. So there always has to be, and believe me when I tell you, God didn't bring the two of you together so that both of you can sit in the corner and go, well, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. There is one of you that has more initiative to be able to take that control. Okay? Law number 9 is the law of activity. Did I say that already? Okay, well, I'm gonna be 52, what's your excuse? Law number 10 is the law of exposure. Okay? What boundaries are you not exposing to your wife? And why are you making that choice? Is there something that you need to communicate to your spouse? Is there a boundary that needs to be explained in a very loving, patient kind of way that you need to explain to your spouse because it's for both of you? Bottom line is, boundaries promote love, they promote truth, and exposing boundaries enable us to fully connect to our spouse. And exposure of those things is the only way for healing and growth to take place. So think about what steps towards exposing some of your boundaries could you take this week. Okay? Think about that. Are you with me? What do you need, miss? Your key? My key? You need my key.